The D&D community has absolutely imploded. Recriminations, accusations, and a whole new D&D OGL has shook everyone. I got sick this week. I lost touch with reality, much like a certain shoreline sorcerer organization, and came back to a ton of hate being directed towards the YouTuber D&D shorts, and also a whole new version of the D&D OGL from Wizards of the Coast. This thing is moving so fast, it's like going through a time warp, seriously. Well, apparently D&D Shorts, one of the major YouTubers that has been receiving leaks and emails and producing content about the whole OGL crisis and D&D thing, has apparently published misinformation, at least according to Wizards of the Coast, or, more accurately, Wizards of the Coast's crisis management PR firm, which we're gonna get into in a second. And the community have been echoing the concerns about misinformation too. So has he? Has D&D Shorts and other YouTubers, perhaps myself included in there, have we been spreading misinformation amongst the community, sowing seeds of discord? Not discourse, there are no discourse seeds involved. Now, okay, it goes without saying, be careful of YouTubers and influencers. YouTubers are not journalists. They are not subject to fact-checking, peer review. They don't have to edit or correct anything. They are usually not experts, except when they're dressed as a clown. Anyone, anywhere can just turn on a camera and say whatever they want. It's an awesome power to be feared. Now, that said, D&D Shorts has been one of the biggest reporters of information about the whole OGL scandal and all the leaks that have been coming out, apparently, from Wizards of the Coast. And the information that is coming to D&D Shorts from Wizards of the Coast, they are being presented to him via email. Now, apparently, those sources have been verified by multiple other YouTubers, and apparently evidence was provided to all of them to show that the sources do actually work at Wizards of the Coast. So how could they be spreading misinformation? Well, there's actually a couple of ways. So anyone who has worked at a large organization knows that a ton of information gets around a workplace that might not necessarily be true, or might not represent a 100% accurate picture of what's going on. And I think that's where some of the allegations from D&D Shorts that have been described as misinformation come from. Especially if we look at the actual supposed misinformation that was apparently published by D&D Shorts. So the biggest one that was honed in on was an allegation from a D&D Shorts source that Wizards are not reading survey feedback from the community in relation to the one D&D Unearthed Arcana. And this was posted on Twitter by D&D Shorts, and it's interesting to note that Wizards of the Coast almost immediately seized upon it, and they were the first ones to describe it as misinformation. Now, alongside this, Wizards also claimed that earlier leaks that D&D Shorts had talked about, so plans for a $30 subscription tier in D&D Beyond, plans for AI DMs, and homebrew being banned, as I also talked about on this channel on a previous video, apparently they are also false, according to Wizards of the Coast. Now, it's really interesting to note that as this occurred, we saw a ton of different Wizards of the Coast team members and former team members also go on to record to say that the information presented by D&D Shorts was false. Specifically about the surveys. Former D&D executive producer Ray Winninger said that they did read the survey information. Wizards designer Mackenzie DeArmas talked about how the Unearthed Arcana survey results were processed, and Tamara Riemann has claimed to have personally read a ton of Unearthed Arcana comments. So I find this really interesting because this is the same Wizards of the Coast that went into a silent lockdown for like what, a week and a half before uttering a peep about the entire OG scandal that was literally burning their company around them, that was literally burning D&D to the ground. So we've seen the messaging from Wizards of the Coast get cleaned up a lot recently, basically. So, yeah, just a little bit suspicious. Especially when we think about the messaging that's been coming out of Wizards of the Coast recently. Does anyone else remember the very first response they gave? They came across extremely badly in their very first OGL statement. Almost petulant, declaring things like, "They win, but so do we," which was entirely ham-fisted and went down in the D&D community like a lead balloon. And if we compare those statements to the more recent statements, which have struck a much better balance between apologetic and caring, we can see that those statements have managed to actually dampen some of the outrage from the D&D community. And it feels like there was an almost overnight change in the management of the community backlash from Wizards of the Coast. In fact, this change has led me to suspect that Hasbro have probably hired a PR crisis management firm who are now in charge of responding to the community. And I don't have any direct evidence of this. Misinformation, misinformation, misinformation. But it just feels like an appropriate response from Hasbro Wizards at this stage, and the way them responding has felt much more professional and much more cunning when compared to before. So that's the context with which I read the supposed misinformation allegations, but yeah, I suspect that these Wizards employees are 100% correct, obviously. They likely have been listening to the Unearthed Arcana feedback. And obviously it is tough for a lot of Wizards employees, especially in the design team or lower down the totem pole, i.e. not at the executive level, to actually come out with a statement about the open gaming license. Because many of them have probably signed NDAs with Wizards of the Coast, or if they speak out in any general way about the industry, that could get them blacklisted. Or worse, not killed. The gaming industry isn't going to kill them, at least as far as I'm aware anyway. But nevertheless, it does feel like many of them have been given permission by Wizards to actually speak about this specific topic. Whereas I don't think they were given permission to talk about the OGL, so that's a little bit telling. It just feels like a very coordinated response from Wizards of the Coast. Okay, let's talk about it. The misinformation supposedly produced by D&D Shorts. I don't think they're the biggest deal, honestly. I don't think that they should undercut the community outrage, nor should it really distract us or change anything. For D&D Shorts' part, it does seem like they are communicating with someone inside Wizards of the Coast, and yeah, it makes sense that they would just report the information that they're told from their source. That makes sense to me. D&D Shorts is very unlikely to be a trained journalist, and therefore I think we should cut them some slack. So I don't think this should distract us or change anything of substance. And the actual allegations themselves are very minor. Allegations, in my opinion, about reading survey responses or not reading survey responses aren't exactly the biggest deal. Honestly, I never assumed that individuals read most of the survey comments anyway. Wizards employees have always been pretty open about the Unearthed Arcana survey data being quantified down to produce certain temperature readings as to whether people did or did not like changes at a high level. It's quantifiable data, not necessarily qualitative. Personally, I think the game design is best left as an auteur, small-scale collaborative effort. I like games that have a vision where the designer knows what they want and they execute that vision as competently as possible. Personally, for me, I just don't like games designed by committee. Games that are meant to be all things to all men. I don't really have an opinion on whether Wizards should or should not listen to feedback. I just want the final form of the game to be fun, and however they get there, I don't really care. Now, that said, if a company solicits feedback from the community, they should probably listen to that feedback. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm glad to hear that apparently they are. So huzzah, good. Now, Wizards of the Coast have also denied that they are looking into AI DMs, and I'm gonna be honest here, this might be a little bit spicy. I suspect that they're telling a little bit of a fib there. I really do. I have to imagine that there are some folks at Wizards of the Coast that are looking at AI DMs, if even as very speculatively. I mean, hell, ever since this Pandora's box was revealed to me, I've been looking into ChatGPT DMs. It's pretty fascinating, and honestly, the commercial implications of AI DMs are obvious. And if they're obvious to me, they are obvious to Wizards of the Coast. And I don't think that most people were, about AI DMs. I think that most people can agree that an AI DM game wouldn't be the same type of experience as a traditional RPG, but that as a concept, it's pretty interesting and could be useful for players. So I don't think like the AI DM thing is like a big deal, but I suspect that it probably frightened Wizards, and so they had to come out and say, no, we're not gonna do that. yet. I'm still retaining my original prediction of 2030 though. It's gonna be a good year. Bad one for DMs. The other allegation that Wizards have declared is misinformation is the $30 subscription tier for D&D Beyond. Now, they have refuted that this is a planned thing at all right now, and to be frank, that's a pretty easy thing to refute. There's a lot of gray area that goes on, but I bet that a lot of the plans to monetize D&D Beyond and 1D&D are still currently in flux and basically TBD. They are to be determined as of this minute. And that means the Wizards could basically claim that any allegations about future monetization plans are false, because they probably are, for now. This $30 subscription tier could have been floated in an email, and that's where the original number came from. Who knows where it came from, but honestly, I think that we could see these types of higher subscription tiers come out of Wizards of the Coast. Time will honestly tell about their monetization plans, but we must not forget the fact that Wizards and Hasbro executives see D&D as under-monetized and want to find new avenues to exploit sure as hell did not make its way to us from an anonymous email. That came straight from the mouth of Cynthia Williams, president of Wizards of the Coast. And we cannot forget that. So I feel like the whole misinformation allegations has been a little bit overstated. Now, this is, though, a really great opportunity to remember to take any leaks at all with a pinch of salt. This is something that I always try to remind viewers when I ever talk about leaks on the channel, because it is definitely something to bear in mind. But the most important thing that I have taken from all this is that Hasbro Wizards, or whatever PR firm they might have hired, will leverage any potential doubt in order to take the heat off themselves, and they will magnify any mistake made by anyone at all that isn't them in order to misdirect the community. I mean, it literally took them a single day and a single accusation for the community to begin fragmenting. So I think it's important that we all keep our eyes on the prize here. We need the original OGL terms to be retained. No ifs, no buts. That's the most important thing. And that has not changed. That has not changed. The overriding objective has not gone away. And Wizards today have revealed a new OGL 1.2 update, a new draft. And can you spot how Wizards have made it clear to us that this is in fact a draft? Huzzah! It's literally that easy. Wizards, it's literally that easy. We used to use this watermark all the time at work. And though Wizards of the Coast claim that OGL 1.2 is harder, faster, stronger, it's still mostly the same thing as 1.1. There have been some changes, but surprise, surprise, a lot of the major problems that the community had with the OGL 1.1 changes are replicated in this new document. The original OGL 1.0A, beautiful, serene, noble OGL 1.0A is... It is explicitly revoked in OGL 1.2. Old stuff that is published under the original 1.0A is still to be published under those terms. But anything new must adopt the new 1.2 terms. You know, if 1.2 goes through. Also, Section 6F of OGL 1.2, entitled No Hateful Content or Conduct, allows Wizards to solely determine what is hateful, and the third-party creator that signs up to this agreement has to give up their rights to fight that decision. That's way too much power given to Wizards of the Coast, in my opinion. Also, OGL 1.2 still relies on the virtual tabletop policy from Wizards, which states that any virtual tabletop that enhances the virtual tabletop experience at all, such as, I don't know, creating spell effects, for example, then that virtual tabletop is not authorized by Wizards. This is obviously to protect themselves and to retain a monopoly over the virtual tabletop experience when 1D&D inevitably lurks out from the sewers. And while this new OGL is partially irrevocable, which is really good, by the way, what that means is that works that are created under the OGL 1.2 license cannot be withdrawn. However, sneaky, the license itself can be withdrawn. So yeah, we sort of got what we asked for. The word irrevocable is in the text of OGL 1.2. It's just that the word itself is redefined within the text itself. Just more smoke and mirrors. In fact, the OGL 1.2 can be terminated on a third party if that third party brings any action challenging ownership of any property, or even if that third party brings any action challenging ownership of any licensed content. That means that if Hasbro, for example, uses a third-party content creator's content, and then the third party tries to challenge that usage, Hasbro has the power to force that third party to stop selling anything that has been licensed under OGL 1.2. Oops. So yeah, there's still a ton of work to be done. This OGL 1.2 is not good enough, and I think that's what we need to remain focused on. And if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on some of the wild accusations that have been getting thrown at Wizards of the Coast lately, check out my video here. And a huge thanks to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread and Crypto Kev. A reminder, the patrons this month get a 40% discount code off Blue Sky Minis, my mini factory store, as well as bonus videos, ad-free content, and even a secret Discord room. How about that? Bye-bye!